Alright, welcome back. Now, I just realized something. Version 2.5 is coming to an end very soon. Only a week or two, I think just a little bit more than 2 weeks are left in 2.5, and then 2.6 is scheduled for 27th of August or 28th of August, one of these 2 days. But in any case, it's time to do the performance test for the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. Now this is an older flagship, although still very strong, still capable, and this is pretty much my old device that I used to play this game on. Now, something very interesting has happened in 2.5, at least for this particular device, for this particular phone here. The Vulkan option did show up after I downloaded the game. And the first thing that obviously I checked out is to see the settings, to see if there is anything new, and there was. The Vulkan option is there. I didn't have to change anything. I didn't have to modify the config file. I didn't have to change the engine ini file. Basically, it was there right out of the box, which I was actually pretty happy with. As I mentioned in the past, I believe Vulkan will slowly be pushed out on more and more devices until it's pretty much on all devices available, which is a good thing. Now, in today's tests, I will go and start a little bit differently. Usually I start with OpenGL first, but today I want to start with Vulkan because it was already available from the initial downloads, and I'm very interested to see how will the 8 Gen 2 perform on this game on Vulkan API, which I think we already kind of know, since this is not the first time I'm doing a test like this, but it is the first time that this device and the 8 Gen 2 has received the Vulkan right out of the box. Usually you had to go and enable it manually, which is something that not everyone really wants to do, understandably so. I mean, there is maybe a risk to it, but so far I haven't seen any risks with that, at least on this game. But yeah, it's much better if the option is available right out of the box, so as it's slowly becoming, because it's much easier to take full advantage of Vulkan. It's much easier to get a better performance. Now, as usual, I have all my necessary monitors and applications and Windows enabled. I actually did install the Scene 8 application, but I actually had issues with that application last time I tried to use it. Basically, for some reason, CPU 7 and CPU 6, for whatever odd reason, have been stuck on 100% load on the Scene 8 application. And basically, what does that do to your processor? Basically, it makes the processor go full speed. 1 or 2 cores go full speed. They draw like 10 watts of power, and what it does in the end, what it happened, it ruined the performance. It made the device very unstable. The frame rate was all over the place. Basically, it ruined the test, and it gave false results. So that's one of the reasons why I did not use that application so far, because it just gave very odd. I had very odd issues with that application. That's the reason why I haven't used it so far. But yesterday or 2 days ago, 3 days ago, I did install it back, and I checked to see if the same bug will occur. It didn't show any bug. It acted normal in this case. In that case, so I think I might include the Scene 8 application in these tests just for fun, just to see how the overall FPS will be between the traditional way of testing, which is this what I'm doing right now, and the testing with the Scene 8 application. I think it's going to be pretty fun to actually test things out on multiple different with multiple different programs. I believe that's going to be pretty interesting to see. So in the next test, I will be using the traditional method, which I'm using right now, and I will add the Scene 8 as well, just to see how the numbers will look. But so far, I gotta say, it's been performing. The game is performing really well so far. The frame rate is surprisingly smooth. Now I say surprisingly smooth. In the previous version updates, with the 8 Elite and in some cases with the 8 Gen 2, the Vulkan FPS was a bit all over the place. With the 8 Elite, the FPS was usually stuck at 49, 51 FPS, which is very odd. That's fixed in 2.5, now it runs full speed. For the 8 Gen 2, I believe in some cases the same bug kind of occurred, but in most cases before the 2.5 update, the 8 Gen 2 actually ran this game better on Vulkan than the 8 Elite, which was pretty funny to see in actual testing, because the 8 Elite is approximately 2.5 to 3 times faster than the 8 Gen 2 when it comes to raw performance. So it was really funny to see better FPS on a 2 generation old chip. Now that's not really the case anymore. The 8 Elite does go full speed and it runs really well. Now, as for the 8th Gen 2, you will see some very odd frame dips to a 30 FPS. Now, I personally believe that's because the game does have that auto CPU throttling, which I have disabled by the way in the settings, but I personally believe that the auto throttling feature is bugged, and I believe that the auto throttling feature doesn't really respond to the in-game setting button. So if you turn it off, it's still enabled, and I personally believe that's what happened. No, I didn't. There it is. I think. Oh, actually, no, it's not yet. But you will see the frame drop to 30, and it will stay at 30 for a couple moments, and then it will go back to 60. So I personally believe that's because of that bug happening. I don't have the bug on the 8 Elite. This is the first time I actually see this happen on the 8 Gen 2. The 8 Elite runs at 60 and it doesn't really budge from that number. For some reason, on the 8 Gen 2 that seems to be happening. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But the overall FPS, I gotta say, it does seem to be much better than before. There it is. It dropped to 30. 28, 30, and then it's pretty much going back up to about 60. Now, there are some frame drops here and there. I would say, while the Vulkan already performs much better than OpenGL, there is definitely still a lot of room for improvement. One thing that's definitely vastly improved is the heat output. The heat output is incredible now. Used to be, I mean, you will see the difference when I go and switch to OpenGL. The CPU basically doesn't get a moment to chill on OpenGL. It will always be like above 80 degrees Celsius basically. With Vulkan, the temperatures do reach, do go to 80, 82, 83, but they also tend to go and stay much lower than that for the most part. For the temperature to do rise while stuff is happening on the screen is nice. It's normal. It's to be expected. But what is a problem with OpenGL is that the temperature stays high all the time. Doesn't matter what you do. So Vulkan definitely does solve that, and there's just a much better thermal output. On Vulkan, which is a good thing, because one of the key features for Vulkan is basically that heat output. Now it's also interesting because in some cases where performance is limited by the lack of CPU utilization, in some cases Vulkan can actually increase the overall power usage. Now I've noticed something. I've noticed that with two different games that I play, War Thunder and Wuthering Waves. War Thunder is drawing about 9 to 10 watts of power on the 8 Elite, but its temperatures are about 65 to 69 degrees Celsius, and it really never goes above that number. On Wuthering Waves, it uses about the same power, but the temperatures are a lot higher. And that's a very interesting thing to note, because that's just the power of optimization that you could potentially do in this game. War Thunder, being one of the most optimized games, will draw power, but at the same time it is doing it in such an efficient way that you really don't get that heat output. It really doesn't heat up the phone at all, actually. With this game, it does still have inefficiencies. Even on the same power draw, it will hit more because it uses some cores more than others, and this is something that's been improved a lot with Vulkan. I mean, before Vulkan was a thing, only 2 to 3 cores, maximum 4, have been utilized for this game, which did create a significant amount of heating. That created a huge bottleneck, and that was problematic, and that issue is still there if you switch back to OpenGL. So the Vulkan switch definitely is going to benefit this game a lot when it comes to performance. And even the developers themselves have kind of pointed that out in the patch notes. If you want better performance, switch to Vulkan, basically. That's what I remember reading there. Now, the first test, I forgot to mention that, the first test will be with Vulkan. First part of Vulkan 60 FPS, second part 120 FPS. Third part of the test will be OpenGL 60 FPS and then OpenGL 120 FPS. That way we will see the differences, the frame rate differences, and the overall stability that we get. Now, I'm actually very surprised by the stability, because I feel like the stability is much better now than it was before in the past. I know in the past, when this was my main device, I actually used to play this game primarily on this device at one point. I used to get like, on average, about 40-45 FPS, I would say. That would pretty much be the estimate that I was getting back then. The main reason for that was a heavy CPU bottleneck, and basically the GPU wasn't utilized. Now with Vulkan, you can actually get the GPU to do stuff, which is the problem that we faced before. The GPU now does work and is being utilized a lot more, but same thing that I said before, I will mention it again. This game isn't really that GPU heavy. As we can all see on the GPU frequency, it doesn't really go much above like 450. In some instances, on some areas in the game, the GPU frequency does go 650 MHz, which is close to full speed, but it's not full speed just yet. So this game, when it comes to GPU, you don't really need that much of a GPU to actually get 60 FPS. For some reason, this game is still quite CPU heavy, and which is pretty funny, because on the 8 Elite is actually the other way around. On the 8 Elite, the CPU isn't really doing much. The clock speeds are close to the default CPU clock speeds, but the GPU does actually get used on the 8 Elite a lot more often. So when it comes to utilization, it's kind of a odd, weird thing to monitor, because in this case, definitely CPU limited. On the 8 Elite, there is no CPU limit, but the GPU seems to work a lot harder. So that's just what I noticed. Why is that the case? I don't really know. I mean, maybe the older chipsets do struggle with this game because of the CPU, but at the same time, I don't really believe that, because I can still get over 60 FPS with frame generation, as we will see later. I definitely believe there's some optimization thing in the background that's causing problems. Well, thankfully with Vulkan that seems to be vastly minimized, because with Vulkan you do remove the CPU bottleneck in most cases. So I kind of wish that I could see more stuff in the background. I think I could, but I would have to root this device, and I don't feel like rooting phones anymore. If you go back up years on this channel, I used to do stuff with custom ROMs. I used to do gameplay tests with custom ROMs back in the day. I really enjoyed that, but unfortunately custom ROMs are not what they used to be, and yeah, it's times have changed, unfortunately. I wish the custom ROM scene would return though. I would definitely still be doing it if it were fun as it used to be fun. So that was 60 FPS with Vulkan. For the most part, I would say a fairly smooth experience overall. There are some weird dips here and there, which I believe it's down to a bug within the settings. Basically, the CPU throttling is enabled even though you disable it. So I believe that's happening there. But it will be time to go and enable frame generation and Vulkan. Now, frame generation does kick in, does work, as we can all see. We are at 120 FPS, but I have noticed that the frame generation doesn't seem to be as stable as I would expect it to be. No, it's not a big deal. I mean, if your target FPS is over 60, you will definitely get over 60 FPS at all times, so that's not going to be a big problem. I believe that with the 8 Gen 2 and maybe with older generation flagships and maybe all the devices, I feel like the frame generation feature isn't really that ready yet to be launched on these devices. Now I think I've read comments saying that they did get frame generation on a 8S Gen 4, 7 Plus Gen 3, and I believe the newer 8, not 8 Gen 4, what was the name of that chip? I forgot. In any case, some of the newer mid-range chipsets that support frame generation, I've heard that they did get the frame generation feature available to them. So I'm fairly sure there is still issues and bugs that they will have to fix, and I believe 2.6 is going to be hopefully a lot more stable that way. But in this case, on the 8 Gen 2, the frame generation FPS seems to be a little bit all over the place. Now, if you want again over 60 FPS, then it's going to give you that boost and it will be smoother than before, but it's just not going to be 120 FPS smooth. The good thing is, it seems the bugs and stuff like that are gone. If you remember in the last tests that I've done with the 8 Gen 2, we could see the scenery flicker in and out. We could see the characters have been glitching out. In some cases you were actually able to see through the map and through the characters, which I believe was pretty interesting. But yeah, frame generation on the 8 Gen 2 in the past definitely had some bugs. These bugs did not appear in 2.5 after I went on and booted up the game, after I turned on the frame generation feature. As we can see, it seems to be normal for the most part. I don't really notice any texture bugs or any visual bugs. I don't notice any flicker or anything like that. The FPS though, we're back at 60 FPS with frame generation enabled. So yeah, I would definitely suspect that the frame generation is a little bit buggy now on the 8 Gen 2 with Vulkan. I think in the last video I did get a better FPS with frame generation enabled and with using Vulkan, but at the same time I also had tons of bugs, I believe. So I'm just double checking to see if I didn't turn something on or off by accident. Yeah, everything seems to be normal. So this is pretty much how the 8 Gen 2 will perform with the frame generation feature enabled. Someone asked me, does the frame generation actually use more power or does it use less power? Actually, it uses more power. It definitely uses more power. On the 8 Elite, it does get the GPU clocks sky high, as it should be. So yeah, it's not something that you want to turn on to save battery. It's something that basically will give you better FPS at the cost of a little bit more power. So that's just what I've noticed, and I think you guys also noticed if you watched the previous video that I made. On this device, it does seem to raise temperatures a little bit, but it doesn't seem to be fully kicking in, because there's still a lot of GPU left. Now, 475 MHz is pretty much what we have seen there. It does go up and down, which is about, I would say, about 50% of the GPU being used currently. That's approximately 50% for this device, which means that there is still a lot of GPU left for generating frames, but it doesn't seem to be fully kicking in. Now, it does take effect, I would say. It does take effect, but it seems to be a little bit buggy. 70 FPS. Yeah, that definitely is a little bit buggy. It's not throttling kicking in. Definitely not throttling. We have a lot of Celsius to go until actual thermal throttling kicks in. I mean, it should stay at 95 degrees Celsius for a very long time before throttling kicks in, and it definitely doesn't do that. So this is definitely down to a bug, which is fine. Again, not really a big deal. After all, the most important thing I would say is that the Vulkan is getting more available and easily accessible to more devices. Frame generation and all that is nice, you know, but I wouldn't really say that it's necessary. I mean, if you want 120 FPS, I guess, then go for it. No, obviously, if you like high FPS, it's welcoming to have the option. That's what I'm saying. But it's not really necessary to have frame generation active on everything, because, you know, I mean, 60 FPS is more than enough for this game. It's already pretty smooth at 60 because of the fluid animations. I know that there's games out there that do feel stuttery at 60 FPS because of the animations and because of the rigged animations that they have. I'm not gonna mention that game, by the way. We all know what that game is, but there's games that have animations like that simply still feel sluggish even at 60. They start to feel normal when you go 120 FPS, but obviously that one particular game that I have in mind right now has 120 FPS available only to one platform. Yeah, and it's not PC, and it's not Android as well. So yeah, thankfully on this game you can get 120 FPS quite easily on a vast majority of devices. I'm actually still not a fan of locking some settings on PC. My PC, for example, my GPU on PC isn't even running at 30%, and they didn't give me the ultra high quality option. I actually have to enable it manually if I want to use them, which I'm not a fan of. They should just allow all the settings so that we can do what we want with the settings and with the graphics. Of course, if they have locked out some graphical settings because of bugs, I can understand that. After all, I have a high suspicion that a lot of things haven't been released in the past because of bugs. Because when I tested them out, they seem to be pretty buggy and they seem to be unfinished. So if that's the case, then that's understandable that they didn't really launch it for everyone at the time, because they did not want to give players a bad experience, which is again a understandable thing and a good way to actually it's a good excuse to do what they've done. No, not a big deal. Again, I'm not too mad. I was a little bit confused, but I'm fairly sure some settings are locked out because of the because of bugs on certain hardware, which is fine, I guess. I'm not going to rush them when it comes to development, because they already done so much. I've never expected to see the Vulkan switch. Like, it's scary to think about it, because I remember I was talking about, I don't want Vulkan to be like, I don't want Vulkan to be forced. I was talking about wanting to have a switch in settings where players can switch between OpenGL and Vulkan, and that's literally the thing that they've added in. And that's the scary part, because that's pretty much the exact thing I imagined. That's what we have received in the game, and I'm blown away by how quickly it was released as well. That was like, I think like 30 days or something like that, when I started to be a little bit serious with feedback. When I was starting to give proper feedback in a lengthy like list, that's when we started to see Vulkan being implemented. I'm very glad that's the case, actually, and that's why I'm saying that we have some good developers on our hands. Anyway, back to the running part. In the running part, now you can actually see something very funny happen. You can see the frame dips when it dips. You see the GPU frequency also dip. In this case, we do actually get some very decent GPU utilization, and we do get some very good frame rate. So in the running part, this is actually very smooth, by the way. So it does want to use the GPU, and it's interesting to note that we are still not using full speed of the GPU. We're getting about 100 FPS right now, which is, I would say, pretty decent, a very good experience already. Yeah, it's definitely a very playable and, I would say, a enjoyable experience. You know, could be, there's a good chance that this is the case, that but at the same time, I'm not really sure. I mean, we were getting above 60 FPS before in combat, so I'm still going to lean towards some minor bugs being in the way to actually fully use this feature on this device. But overall, is it playable? Yes. Would most players notice the frame dips? I wouldn't really say so. You would notice the freeze frames, the stutters. That's what players would notice the most. But the FPS to me was pretty smooth from start to finish, and yeah, easily able to enjoy the game in this way. The most important thing is that there is no critical visual bugs that would definitely get in the way of gameplay. This was so far a decent experience. I was not perfect, not ideal, but not bad at the same time. So it's pretty decent, I would say. So let's go and switch to OpenGL, and let's switch to 60 FPS again, and then we will see how that will perform. Now we have seen the temperatures. Overall temperatures on Vulkan have been really good, very, very solid, so I will not complain about the about temperatures for Vulkan. We all know that Vulkan does have the chance to improve temperature, but at the same time, in some games, Vulkan can actually increase the power usage, but it will also massively improve the FPS and the frame rate. That also depends from game to game. Some games do tend to get better FPS and at the same time also tend to draw more power. Some games will do the opposite, get better FPS but use less power, which is what happens with Wuthering Waves. Okay, OpenGL has been enabled, and first thing I would like you to take a look at would be the temperatures. The temperatures are going to be the key factor here. The reason why I just go Vulkan with any game I play. Temperatures are one of the main reasons. So we are already at 83 degrees Celsius. The frame rate, now also keep a look at the frame rate. Yeah, this is definitely slower. Initially we did get about 60 FPS fairly quickly, and the overall game was less stuttery, was overall smoother. we were getting 60 FPS a lot more, and overall the temperatures were also lower. We're at 87 degrees Celsius now. The GPU utilization did significantly drop. Basically it dropped at default level, and this is pretty much how this game used to run on the 8th Gen 2. Even on some of the other devices, this is pretty much the performance that I remember when I was using this device as my primary device. So temperatures on the CPU are still very high. I'm also going through the same areas so that we can have a good comparison between the temperatures. FPS is now close to 60, about 60, but the temperatures are definitely higher, and the device is obviously going to be drawing a little bit more power. So let's do some combat. This is where the fun begins, because in combat you definitely feel the OpenGL struggle with the frame rate a lot more. And I want to mention one thing at the same time. You guys have also told me that on some of certain devices that your OpenGL performance was better than your Vulkan performance. I actually experienced the same thing in 2.3 and 2.4. I remember getting overall better FPS on the 8 Elite on OpenGL than on Vulkan. That's primarily because of optimization. That was before the Vulkan API was ready for the 8 Elite. I think they are actually doing it chip by chip. Basically they're taking popular chips and they're optimizing it for the popular chips. That's my guess. But if you get better FPS on OpenGL, then use OpenGL. If you get better FPS and stability on Vulkan, then use Vulkan. I did have that problem in the past in 2.4, 2.3 actually, primarily in 2.3. So I definitely know what you guys are talking about, because I've been there. But I believe that with updates that Vulkan performance will definitely get better and better. That's pretty much what I experienced myself. It went from being less performant. Vulkan went from being less performant than OpenGL to actually being much better than OpenGL. One thing though that is going to have benefits is definitely the power usage. Even if the API isn't fully optimized for the chip or for the game in general, you will still get the benefit of using less power. Now that's how it should be. That's just from my personal experience. I always had lower temperatures with Vulkan than OpenGL, and that's pretty much why I used Vulkan even before it was fully launched with the game, with the settings. I used Vulkan because of the power usage being just overall much less, and the heat was also much less, but temperatures are still sky high. I mean, this is pretty much the issue with OpenGL and with this game. I think in the development they went with OpenGL because of compatibility, because they wanted the game to be available for as many players as possible. That's why the system requirements for this game are actually very low. If you look at the system requirements for Wuthering Waves, a Snapdragon 835 is like the lowest. Now the Snapdragon 835 was released in like I think 2017 or so, so it was nearly 9 years ago. That's a very old chip, and this game runs on that, by the way. It runs on a 2016 device, which is absolutely insane that it runs on such old hardware, but it runs. That's because of OpenGL and compatibility. Now it runs. Does it run well? No. Definitely doesn't run well, but you know, it has that compatibility that I find it's maybe overdone a little bit, because I mean, who's using a Snapdragon 835 now? That those chips are ancient, they're very old. But in any case, surprisingly, the frame rate isn't all too bad. Although, if you look at the temperatures, yeah, that's where the fun begins, because that little chip is now quite warm, and actually will touch the screen a couple times. Maybe I already done it, maybe I didn't. But on the overall heat output on the exterior of the device is definitely a lot higher than on Vulkan, much higher. I could comfortably warm my hand on this device during winter when I launched this game in OpenGL. So it definitely, I mean, I guess it has a compatibility, but for higher end devices, I see OpenGL more as a how to describe it properly. It's a difficult question, actually. I see it as something that is going to hinder performance, basically something that's going to prevent the device from achieving its full potential. And something sad happens with the 8 Gen 2 in general. This chip, even to this day, on most games, is simply prevented from using its full capacity because of OpenGL. It is sad that Vulkan adoption started with the 8 Elite, because so many other older chipsets would benefit from Vulkan, and so many older chipsets will basically last so much longer if only developers opted out for Vulkan from the very start. I mean, this game, for example, runs really well with Vulkan on this device, basically bringing new life into the device. Other big games, other open world type games of this genre, older game in this case, because there's not many out there, but you know what game I'm talking about right now. The other certain game, I've been told actually that they added the Vulkan for the G game, and I still need to test that out, because I cannot believe that they actually done that. And again, I think we all know why they added Vulkan there, if they even added it. I've heard that they did. I will have to check it out myself, obviously, but if it were not for Wuthering Waves, the other game would definitely not get Vulkan support. I mean, come on. 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025. Did it really take them so long to do something very easy? Such a simple task. I don't know. I mean, there's a reason why I only play Wuthering Waves when it comes to open world games, and I will add like 3 more games of open world type genre that I'm actually excited for. But the G game, no, I'm not touching that. They completely lost my trust, and I just don't want to expose my hardware to that game. Now, obviously, I will test it out, but I'm not going to be playing it primarily, because they had like so many years to fix stuff. They didn't. And I've also heard that they are trying to like enhance the visuals, and the character design is getting better there. I mean, if it were not for Wuthering Waves, they would still be stuck with deadpan face characters. So yeah, I mean, it's very sad what happened to the other game. Very sad, but it is what it is. We have Wuthering Waves, so there's a reason why I don't like to do a direct comparison between these two games, because you know, it's no point to do that anyway. Really, I mean, you just need to take a look at screenshots from one game and then look at a screenshot from the other game, and yeah, it's very easy to come to a conclusion after that. Anyway, that was the OpenGL test, and if there's one big difference that we have noticed here, the frame stability, and I would say the heat output. No, the biggest difference is definitely the heat output. This little phone got toasty on OpenGL, as expected on OpenGL. So now it's time to do the other thing, which will mean enabling frame generation and OpenGL. I'm actually quite interested to see what will happen, since we are already kind of getting the chip really warm with frame generation, and the fact that it does draw a bit more power. It's going to be pretty funny to see how warm it will get and what frames we will get with OpenGL. So let's go, frame generation turned on, and let's see, it does, well, that's surprising or unsurprising. Where is my 120 FPS? Well, we got 80 we got 80 FPS, 80, 90, there it is, it's kicking in. Okay, took a second. Are we going to break the 100 FPS barrier, or is it going to stay at 80, 70, 80 FPS? That's actually an interesting result. I feel like the reason why we are not seeing 120 FPS right now is a CPU bottleneck. I personally firmly believe that we are encountering a OpenGL CPU bottleneck here. We were getting 100 and over 100 FPS on Vulkan, but there it is, now it is, okay, but it's in an open area. Okay, so we are definitely, yeah, we're definitely being bottlenecked by the API here. Yep, 100%. I feel like we're getting bottlenecked by the API here. The CPU is already going full speed, by the way. I mean full speed. It's going as fast as OpenGL it's allowing it to go. So this is kind of a shocking experience, because I actually did expect the OpenGL performance with frame generation to be much better than what we are seeing here. But seems like Vulkan's giving better frame generation performance right now. Okay, it's unexpected, but alright. That's why we do these tests, to see differences. Alright, let's go and do some I mean, the FPS is not bad. I guess if you want to target like 80 FPS or 90 FPS, this is going to be working really well. I mean, it's still better than 60, so it's still, you will still experience the boost of frame generation if you're using OpenGL at the expense of extra heat in this case. Let's see if the FPS will stay around that. It actually does seem to stay roughly about 60, 65. It does have drops to be expected though. Well, that's definitely a very interesting and pleasant surprise, or unpleasant, depending on how you look at it. Now, if I could just focus more on the boss battle, but I guess let's just focus on the FPS. Yeah, it seems to be, I mean, it's not bad. It definitely is not bad. It's still better than 60 FPS. If you want more frames, then this is definitely going to deliver more frames. But it's not exactly getting 100 or above 100 FPS. Now, personally, from my experience, I don't really mind that, because it is already very playable as it is. So it doesn't really get in the way of ruining the experience, so that's a good thing. Does it have some little stutters? Well, yeah, the stutters are present in OpenGL and in Vulkan. That's down to optimization and at the end of the day, which is pretty interesting, because the 8 Elite, for example, doesn't have that problem, but at the same time the 8 Elite is like 3 times more powerful, so it's a little bit too powerful for this game, to be honest. That's why that thing is just running it so well. You know, at one point you have so much power that it doesn't really matter how much something optimized it is, because if you simply have raw power, then it will just run over whatever you throw at, which isn't really the thing I would like to go to, because on PC gaming, that's the thing that ruined it pretty much. Everything requires DLSS or FSR or frame generation just to get playable FPS. I don't want to see that on mobile. Mobile has that sweet spot right now, and mobile feels like PC did in 2016, which I would say, from my experience, was definitely the peak gaming I've experienced, at least back in 2016. Games, everything felt so good back then. Every game I played back then was just unique, and I just enjoyed a lot. Nowadays, very few games that I actually am able to enjoy that way, which is pretty sad, but you know, it is what it is. Mobile feels like 2016 felt like in PC, and I would love for it to stay that way for as long as possible, because this is pretty much the sweet spot, the golden age, as some may call it. In any case, you know, I got a little bit nostalgic there. My apologies for that. I missed 2016. Was one of the best years I've experienced in my life. But yeah, back to present, back to 2025, I guess. It was decent. That's a decent performance, actually. I'm surprised by. I'm actually surprised by how stable this works. In some cases, on some chipsets, the OpenGL plus frame generation combo might work better than the frame generation plus Vulkan combination. That really comes down to the chipset. That really comes down to the processor and end device, pretty much. Because I know that not all chipsets are going to be equally optimized, or sure, the game is not going to be equally optimized for all chipsets, which seems to be the case. Kuro seems to be going on a chip per chip basis when it comes to optimization, as I mentioned before in the video. They are basically choosing the most popular chipsets, and they're optimizing the game for those chips primarily, which includes all the new mid-range chipsets, the older flagships and the current flagships. I believe those are their primary target, and then I believe they will probably do the same thing with the lower end mid-range chipsets, or middle end and low end mid-range, because now the mid-range chipsets have been separated in like 5 different categories, which makes this whole thing even more. Let me tell you, when I looked at the recent chips that have been released, I kind of was lost in naming, because there's like 8 Elite 2, there's like 8 Gen 5, there's like 8S Gen 5, there's the 8 Gen 5, like there's 70 different names, there's 70 different chips. It's very easy to get lost in what's actually, you know, mid-range, what's flagship. The naming definitely got messed up lately a lot when it comes to the Snapdragon chipsets. I'm not a fan of the naming, actually. I love the old naming, like 865, 875, you know, it should be 875 really. They should have kept that. It had a unique charm to it, I guess, but you know, it is what it is. It is what it is. The 8 Elite might be their, like, best of the best type of chip. I don't know. We'll have to see what they launch and what they release. But yeah, I don't blame anyone who gets lost in naming. I get lost myself, and I actually am pretty good with names and stuff like that. Anyway, time to do the running test, and then it will be time to end the 8 Gen 2 test for version 2.5. Overall, there is improvement. I feel like there is an improvement, at least for this particular chipset. The overall frame stability seems to be better. However, I would say I have encountered a little bit issues with frame generation, and I feel like the game itself has some bugs here and there, which is again fine. You can't really have something this complex perfect, and that's why it's important for the developers to address issues, which they're doing, and to fix issues, which again Kuro is doing, so huge thumbs up to Kuro for that. I feel like the game is getting better and better. I've said that before, I'll say it again. Overall, my experience with the game is getting better and better, performance is getting better and better. Vulkan is being expanded more and more, frame generation is also being expanded more and more, although I would say I would say frame generation isn't as important as Vulkan. I would primarily focus on getting Vulkan to work flawlessly and then adding frame generation to enhance the experience, but they're getting there. They're definitely getting there. They're working on it, I can see that. And overall, the 2.6 update is going to be very interesting to check out. Obviously, when that update is launched, I will do the performance test. Hopefully this time I'll be faster. I'll do the test on the 8th Gen 2, on the 8th Elite, and hopefully, if I don't forget, on the 870. But yeah, key difference that we have noticed here, the FPS seems to be overall a little bit more stable with Vulkan. The heat output seems to be less on Vulkan. The frame generation FPS seems to be higher on Vulkan, while also seemingly showing less heat output. The frame generation FPS and heat on the heat on the OpenGL API with frame generation activated is definitely higher, and the FPS isn't exactly all there, I would say, but I feel like the overall frame rate experience was stable. It didn't have those high ups and downs like we have seen on Vulkan. On OpenGL, the frame generation FPS seemed to be more stable, not 120, but floating around 70 to 90 FPS, which still is above 60, and you will definitely experience that FPS boost while playing the game. So, with that being said, this will conclude this test. Overall, in my case, from my experience, a very positive experience, and it's getting better, definitely getting better and better. So huge thumbs up to Kuro for that. And next time when I return in 2.6, we will go back to the 8 Elite and we will test out the performance of the new version update. But with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed. If you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.